Hi, I'm Allie Hamilton, and I'm so happy to welcome you to the Come As You Are podcast. Every week, we'll be talking about some aspect of healing, usually around childhood wounds and complicated familial relationships. The topics will always coincide with my personal essay of the week, and this will be a place where we can take a deep dive together. I'm so thrilled you've joined me and delighted for you to always come as you are. Hi there. Hi there. Welcome to our talk. Today, the topic is escalation. I also want to mention that I missed last week's episode, which would have been The Devil's in the Details, because I was driving my son, who is 18 and heading into his sophomore year of college. We were heading north, and I wasn't driving him. I was caravanning because he just bought his first car and is moving into his first apartment. So all of these big milestones, of course, helping him do those things as best I can. And I have a 16-year-old, my daughter, who is going to be heading to college herself in a couple of years. She's in her junior year of high school. And so last week and this week, and even the week before, all the things that I have been writing about lately, I was thinking about this as I was thinking about today's episode. They're, of course, interrelated. So much of it has to do with, for me, always kind of like the microcosm versus the macrocosm. I really think that when we look at the world around us, it's always going to be a reflection of whatever's happening within us. Now, there's a lot of people in the world, so I'm not speaking about you personally or me personally, but just, what we're seeing. If you look around and you're seeing a lot of chaos or violence or lack of compassion, or, those are not qualities that just exist in the air. Societies are made up of human beings. And so that is all that everything that we're seeing around us that is either beautiful or, inspiring or incredible, or violent or hard to understand. So much of it, not all of it, is man-made, human-made. Of course, there's incredible beauty, poetry, inspiration in nature. I mean, if you want to know what I think we would do ourselves a great service if we backed off and really just allowed ourselves to feel some gratitude for what we receive when we arrive here, just being human beings on this planet that really is providing everything we need. If we had not grown into a species that is hoarding and constantly trying to plant our flags and, decide we own this and we're going to put our name on this and we're going to stamp this down. The whole concept for me has always been just off. It's like we arrive here, each one of us, if we're lucky, we get, 75 to 100 years, maybe 108. A lot of people get so much less than that. They get really just a blink of time here on this planet. But no matter how much time you get, even if you get 108 years, that's still such a blink of time. It's such a small amount. And it's so strange to me to spend the little amount of time that you have on this planet trying to, own it, trying to take ownership, trying to say, this belongs to me, this is mine. I know that it's a culture, and the world, because we're so interrelated over these devices, it's spread this ideology of like me, mine, I'm going to own this. And forgive me, I have a little bit of a sore throat. So I'm a little, you're probably going to hear a little bit of raspiness. It's just, it never has made sense to me we're visitors here. We're here, we're gone. We're here, we're gone. It's like, the waves roll in, the waves roll out. And I know that can be painful for a lot of people. They don't like to think about the temporary nature of life, their own mortality, their own vulnerability, their own fragility. For a lot of people, it's so uncomfortable to think about that. And for me, I feel like I don't want to become overwhelmed with those thoughts, especially when I think about the people I love, more than anything. But I want to keep it in my mind enough that I'm not wasting time, that I'm not wasting a day, that I'm not saying the things that feel really important. I want to make sure the people I love know how much I love them, and that there aren't days going by where I'm not doing whatever I can do as one human being to try to make the world a better place. And so and part of it also, I think, is the things that happened along the way. And that's part of what I was writing about last week in The Devil's in the Details. We're hearing a lot about context lately. And, this is being taken out of context, or that's being taken out of context. And so I was writing about that because conceptually, I was writing about context, because I don't actually think you can take a person's actions out of context or their feelings out of context. We all have our histories. We all have our things that have happened along the way that have shaped who we are, how we feel, what our thoughts are about, our agency, like how much power we have in this world, whether we are invited to express our feelings openly or not. And so much of it has to do with those early childhood experiences. And for me, again, writing about this last week in The Devil's in the Details, which you can certainly go and find. I'll link it in this episode in the description. But I was writing about, maybe like origin story, whatever you want to call it. But for me, a big thing has always been, or was, abandonment. That was a huge fear of mine for a very long time, because when I was 4, everyone disappeared for some amount of significant time. And my maternal grandmother died. And I did not realize that she was sort of the glue holding everything together, because I was 4. So I would not have been able to know that. As my mother's mother, who was my mother's best friend, my mom was 24 when she had me. So she was 28 when this happened. And my mom and dad were the last year of my grandmother's life just keeping up appearances, because my mother did not want her mother to be worrying about what was going to happen to her and to me when her marriage ended, which she knew it was going to. My dad started cheating on my mom when she was 7 months pregnant with me. And she found out when I was 3 months old. And it did not stop. That behavior did not stop. Now, my mom and dad had an affair. He was married when they met. So it's one of those things, if they'll do it with you, they'll do it to you. But which does not mean I don't have compassion for my mom, because I do. She had her own trauma, and that's what I'm talking about. Everyone has stuff, everyone has stuff in their history that is painful and difficult. And I think you liberate yourself or not to the degree that you're willing to look at it and work on it and, get your hands dirty a little bit. And that work can be incredibly uncomfortable and confrontational and painful. And I know what I'm talking about because I did it. But I did it because I realized if I didn't, that wiring, what ended up happening is my grandmother died, and literally the next week I woke up. I was there at the hospital the day that my grandmother died, and I remember this because I was too little. They would not allow me in the hospital room, so I was walked around the outside of the hospital all day by different family members. My mom, not too much my mom. She was pretty much in the hospital room with her mother most of the day. My dad, my cousins, my aunt, my uncle, So I remember that day very vividly. We saw my grandmother every day of my life before that. She was either at the apartment in New York City with my mom. I think she felt probably, I don't know this for sure, but I know my mother felt very overwhelmed by motherhood and having a baby and having the responsibility of keeping a baby alive, because she talked to me about that later. So her mother, Nanny is what I call my grandmother, was with us every day, or we were there in Jersey City, like right across the river, one or the other. And so it was a very sudden, she was gone, that was all, everything changed. And the next week I woke up and my mother was sitting alone in the dining room with the lights out. My mother was never a person to sit alone in a room or to sit, really. She was always moving, always cleaning, always doing something. And so I remember that walking out like down the hall and seeing her in the dining room alone, sitting at the table. And she told me, your dad is not going to live with us anymore. He is going to have his own apartment. And once it's set up, you'll start to visit him, but this is your home. You live with me. Your home is with me. You'll be visiting your dad. I could not comprehend what she was saying to me because he hadn't said goodbye. It did not make any sense. I went into their bedroom and started opening his closet, drawers. Everything's gone, except for his bathrobe, which I thought, well, he'll have to come back for that. And he had wigs. My dad was an actor, and he had gone bald early, like Sean Connery bald, that strip around the back kind of a thing. And so he had all these wigs, and he had left some of the styrofoam wig heads in the bathroom. And I just thought, well, he's going to have to come back. There was all those wooden shoe shapers, that people put in dress shoes to keep them shaped. Those were in the back of the closet on the floor. So, I just couldn't make it make sense because I was very close to my dad and I could not imagine that he would leave and not say goodbye to me. I'm sure they decided together that was going to be easier for me, or I don't know, but that's what happened. And then my mom drove me to a friend of hers had a farm in upstate New York, I think. I don't know exactly where it was. But we drove, and she told me about the farm, and they have, there are cows and there are horses and there are pigs and chickens and, so I thought, oh, this is going to be good. Like, I'll be with my mom at a farm. Okay. But we got there, and the first thing that happened is we went grocery shopping, and my mom was buying the things that I liked to eat. And then we got back to the house, and she started telling her friend what time I go to bed and things, the way she would speak to a babysitter if she was going out. And that is when I realized she was going to leave me there. And I started crying, begging her not to do that. And she pulled me outside and was like hissing at me, to stop crying. And she basically told me she needed to rest. And, it's promising her, like, I'll be quiet, I'll do anything, please don't leave me here. She left. I do not know how long I was there. I know it was a significant amount of time, and it could have been a week, it could have been a month. I'll never know, because this was the kind of conversation she would not have with me. She was someone who would not look at her history or at the painful things in her life, even in the present. She just did not want to have those conversations. And she would become enraged if you tried to have those kinds of conversations with her. If I said to her, Mom, tell me whose farm was that? Where was I? She would become irate. It's just, my mother died, your father left, like I needed some time, like, very defensive. And no matter what because I tried a few times along the way, I'm the kind of person who like wants to understand and wants details and wants to know, put the pieces together, right? And I try, like, who was she even? Like, was it a friend from school? Like, who was that? But she was unwilling to. She would become angry, like, oh, it's all my fault, kind of a thing, like. It's like, I'm not saying that it's your fault. I'm just curious about where I was and who that was and like how long I was there and what happened. And she just would not have that kind of conversation ever. My mother had incredible qualities as a human being. She genuinely did. If you had met her, you probably would have loved her. If you met her socially, you probably would have thought like, wow, what a force she was. She just like walk into a room and she was a force. Smart, funny. She could be incredibly kind. There was always a couch in our apartment. If somebody was, one of her friends had fallen on hard times, there was always room for that person at our house. But she was an alcoholic. And what unfortunately happened along the way is I think that she, I think that because my dad started cheating on her when she was pregnant with me, I think subconsciously, maybe consciously, she blamed me for the end of that relationship. She also lost her dad when she was 13, very suddenly. My dad was 20 years older than my mom. So, I think there's a lot of stuff there that if she'd been willing to really look at it, it probably would have been helpful for her, for me, but that didn't happen. And so she would drink and she would become enraged and she would come after me. And it was incredibly painful. And a very frequent, regular thing that was happening in my life as I was growing up. And so, but for me, I just remember being on this farm and watching her drive away, bawling, and then not having any, just like I knew. I mean, I was 4, no way to reach my dad, no way to reach my aunt, my uncle, my cousins, certainly no way to reach my grandmother who had passed away. I remember thinking like after a while, I was there long enough that I thought, I'm not sure she's coming back. Like I might live here now. I don't know. And there were things like I have always wondered why she didn't just drop me off at my aunt and uncle and cousin, like, cause I was so, that would have been fine. I was with them all the time. I had, spent my childhood with them, summers at the Jersey Shore at our my grandmother's house. And I think that she was probably embarrassed to need a break. And I think also her family was not so in favor of this marriage with my dad because he was 20 years older and because he was married when she met him, and so I think she felt some shame and some shame and some embarrassment that this marriage had not worked out after all. I think her family did, come around, ended up loving my dad. He was a very charming, charismatic guy, but not somebody you would have wanted as your dad or your husband. But, so I suspect that's why. So eventually she came back and got me, and then new life began. And new life was going back and forth between my mom's and my dad's. My dad almost instantly when I started seeing him again, was already with the woman who would become my stepmom. And seeing other women on the side. And so he would pick me up from my mom's or pick me up from school, and we would go see a quote unquote lady friend. And he would put me in front of the TV and like go into the other room and quote unquote rehearse. And then we would leave. And on the way home to the woman who became my stepmom, he would say, we're not going to mention that this is where we were or what we did because I wasn't doing anything wrong, but she's jealous and, she'll get upset. And so we're just not going to mention that. Okay. And I knew that what he was saying to me was true because when women would call the house, she would go into the bathroom and sob all night. It was terrible. It was devastating. So I learned to be quiet about what was happening. And then, he would talk to me about his need to be free and how he couldn't commit, and all these women just wanted him to themselves, and if they would just share, everything would be okay. And even my mother, if she had just been willing to share, so he became, in my young mind, the victim of these women who just like couldn't share, these selfish women who wouldn't share. And he would sob, about I can't commit and I need to be free. And I'm like 4, 5, 6. Your dad's crying in your arms. It's a terrible feeling. So that's like what was going on, for quite a while. And at my mom's, as I got older and started to question, when you're little and a parent is drunk, you don't have any idea that it's the alcohol. You just know that they sound funny, their voice sounds funny, they're obviously having like some kind of trouble standing up. If there's rage, you see they're enraged, but you have no way of understanding they've had alcohol, and that's what's going on. So for me, for a long time, I did not understand what was going on. I just would ask the people closest, the people that I knew, it would not be a betrayal to her for me to ask, is she okay? Like, what's happening with my mom? I'd have to like help her into a cab, and I'm like 7, 8. She couldn't walk in a straight line. I have to help her figure out like the money when we would get to the apartment and have to pay the cab driver. And it was always like, your mom is a social drinker. She's fine. You're sensitive. You're dramatic. Everything's okay. And that continued, it was like 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And a lot of these people did not know what was happening, and how bad it was. And, what would happen when we would get back to the apartment, or when she would come back to the apartment. Eventually she and my stepdad, she got remarried when I was 8, and they had my brother when I was 11, 10, 11, depending on the time of year. We have 10 or 11 years between us. But I was taking care of him like happily. I was like, best thing that could ever have happened is when my mom had a baby. But they would come home sometime, and she would come right into my bedroom, flip on the light, like if anything, for no reason, or because there was like a fork in the sink or something. It did not matter what I did or how like I could come home and do all my homework and, make sure that my brother had dinner and like was, had his bath and stories and all that, and put him to sleep and clean the apartment. But if I got one thing wrong, she'd flip that light on and it would be on. And even if I got nothing wrong, she was in the mood to rage, that's what would happen. And she was unfortunately in the mood to rage more nights than not. And I think that's all I'll say about that. But it was not just emotional. It was also physical. It was very painful and confusing because I loved her like the sun. I loved her like, the sun, the moon, the star. I thought my mother was the most beautiful, incredible person, and all I wanted was her to love me. And as a kid, if someone's behaving this way, you just think they don't love me. Like they must not, she must not love me if she can treat me like this or say these things to me or do these things. Like she must not, there must be something wrong with me. That's what you think. So that was like what was going on. I'm keeping secrets at my mom's. I'm keeping secrets at my dad's. I have this great fear that like, if I'm not good, everyone will just disappear. Even though I couldn't have named that as a kid, that's there all the time. And so, and then I have a whole bunch of people telling me when I'm asking them, is she okay? Is this okay? This doesn't seem okay. She's fine. You're the one with a perception problem. She's fine. So of course, eventually you become a teenager, the hormones hit, you're like, as maybe getting to be almost as tall as your mom, I wasn't as scared anymore. When you try to be perfect for years and years and you're still not getting that kind of, affirmation from you, that pain turns to rage. It's like what happens. And I did become enraged at a certain point because I just felt so deeply hurt. And still, there was no acknowledgement like, yes, I have a problem. Yes, I need some help. That never happened. She would not admit she was an alcoholic. She would not admit she needed help. If I would say to her, like in a good moment, what's going on, Mom? Like, why do you feel this need to numb out almost every night? Like what's happening? I am fine. I don't feel the need to numb out. I enjoy my Chardonnay, but you just weren't going to get anywhere with that kind of conversation. And so it was tough. And when you're in that kind of scenario, the only thing that you can do is eventually have boundaries, like figure out how to keep yourself safe. If it's somebody you want to have in your life, which I absolutely did, then how do you maneuver? How do you manage to have someone in your life if you know that they're going to start drinking probably around 5 o'clock? Then you try to figure out ways you cannot be interacting after 5 o'clock. You figure it out. You do your best. And eventually what ended up happening for me is I moved to Los Angeles. I moved 3,000 miles away. So there was a geographical boundary. And that was probably the best thing I ever did for us because I was really close to her. I know it might sound a little bit like hard to understand in a short talk, but we were incredibly close. Like I loved her and she loved me, but her love was just like very twisted and barbed. And, it just wasn't easy. And the rules were always confusing. I could never predict like what was going to happen. And so moving was good. And I was able to disentangle myself and figure out who am I outside of the context of my mother's drinking and my mother's alcoholism. Like, who am I and how do I start a life that's going to feel good that isn't so intertwined with all of that pain and anguish, because there was a lot of heartache there. And I'm talking to you about this, and I was writing about it because, I ended up doing a tremendous amount of work on my stuff. I'm like, I learned the hard way, believe me, I tried, that I was not going to change her. I was not going to get her to see the light. It didn't matter if I wrote the perfect email or the perfect text or like said things in exactly the way. It did not matter what I did. She was not going to get help unless she decided she needed help. And so the question became, what can I do how can I liberate myself from all of this stuff that really, was not mine. It's stuff I grew up with, but this is not me. This is just the tree under which I grew, and I also don't want to be somebody who had like abandonment issues for my whole life and that sort of anxious attachment style, And we are not human beings. We're not set in stone. There is always room to heal and grow and rewire your system if that is something that you feel like you need to do. If you find yourself chasing after unavailable people, because that's what started to happen. I got out into the world, and of course I've got this history with my dad objectifying women and treating me like a therapist and burdening me with his, all of his very adult problems, and then being incredibly manipulative. Like, I got to be 13, I didn't want to go to my dad's anymore. I was so done with that whole scene and the lying and the, making himself the victim of all these women. It's like, no, dude, you are the perpetrator. You are wreaking this havoc. And, I don't want this. Like, this is your stuff to solve. I'm your child. You're supposed to take care of me. You're supposed to protect me. Like, this is not how this should be. I'm not supposed to be taking care of you and worrying about you and listening to your stuff all the time. And like, I could look back. I realized as I got older, as you do, like what had happened with him during my childhood was ridiculous. This man was 45 when I was born. He's 45 years old. So to be talking to your tiny child that way and crying in her arms and whatever is like, getting her to lie with you. And I mean, we'd go back and have dinner with my stepmom, and she would say, "What did you do after school?" And he would say, "Oh, we went to the museum or we went to the playground," things I would have loved to have done. But that's not where we were. We were at, this one's house, that one's apartment, and I was sitting in front of a TV while he was banging her in the other room. Like, that's what was happening. But I'm sitting there quietly because I know, as he said, like if he had said, "Oh, we were at so-and-so's," that was not ever going to be a thing that she'd be okay with. So to unravel and rewire, right? That takes a lot of, you got to really want it. And even if you really want it, it's still going to take a tremendous amount of dedication and discipline and just desire to not be held back by stuff that really had nothing to do with you, but is like now part of your, is part of the soil that you grew up in. Like, how do you, and for me, some of it, certainly therapy was really helpful. And I think it's always a great tool for people. If you find an excellent therapist, amazing. Because it's just a good way to have like another set of eyes on the situation, like that is objective. And, a good therapist, I think, will help you identify patterns. So if you are in yoga, we call them samskaras, joined action. If you find yourself, for example, chasing after unavailable people, which is a thing you might do if that was your experience of love as a kid, like could never quite get it, couldn't get the approval, couldn't get the love, couldn't get the affection that I wanted, or the consistency or the feeling of really being cherished and treasured. And I just couldn't get that from my mother. She was not affectionate. She was not one to heap on verbal praise. She was one to let you have it if you stepped a toe out of line. But the straight A's were expected. So was everything else. There was no talking back. I was not allowed to express anger or sadness or anxiety, anything that would cause the grown-ups around me to have to stop what they were doing and give me attention, or I think, cause them to worry that maybe what they were doing was creating some pain for their kid. That was unacceptable. So what happens for you as the kid is you just learn to like edit and wrangle your emotions and shove them down. If you grow up doing that, you're going to become a young adult who does not really know how you feel anymore. You just have cut yourself off from all of those feelings because that's the only way to survive in that kind of environment. And so all those things were true for me. I was repressed rage, I think, becomes depression. And I think for a lot of women, they'll say they're sad, but they are really enraged and they've just shoved it down because culturally, we don't like angry women. There's all that stuff too. There's society and what society's telling you you're allowed to do or how you're allowed to feel or, how to grab those brass rings, how you have to be, all that stuff. And I was like, okay, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Like what am I supposed to do in order to be happy? Because just someone give me a roadmap and I'll do it. And culturally, the roadmap is like go to a good school, get the good grades, graduate, get it. And I did all those things. I left high school a year early, graduated early, went to Columbia, went to Barnard College. Like I did all the things. I starved myself. I mean, part of that was the repressed rage. Is like I am not in control of so much of what is happening around me. I have no say over my schedule. I have no say over, any of it. I have no say over what's happening to my body. I have no say in so many different realms because like when my mother would get angry, a lot of the time when I was a kid, it would get violent. And, when you feel like, okay, I don't have any way to protect myself, I don't have any way to keep myself safe. Like, that feeling of powerlessness is really, it's painful. But I think what happens as a coping mechanism is you start cutting yourself off from that pain because it's not sustainable. But you're also cutting yourself off from joy. You have to cut yourself off from all the feelings. And so I had to really work to unravel all that. And the second part for me, therapy was really great as far as identifying all these things. Like, okay, I get it. I understand why I'm having like certain issues and problems and things that are coming up again and again, certain patterns, samskaras, whatever you want to call them, right? I understand. That makes sense. But that's cerebral, right? Like I can look at this and I can sort of map it out. And of course, a 4-year-old, if everyone disappears, is going to have like that fear. And my mother was also somebody who would withdraw love if you displeased her. So, and she would really drive that lesson home. I remember having some kind of emotional, something when I was like 5.5, and I told her, I was back in the apartment with her at this point, that I wanted my dad. And she said, well, he's not around or whatever. And I said, I want to go see my aunt, my uncle, my cousins. And she was like, good luck. Like, you can't get to New Jersey by yourself. And it was just like, and I said I wanted my grandmother, which I knew she was in heaven, even though I, didn't. And that was it. She like grabbed my suitcase and started throwing all my clothes from my drawers into this little suit. And I instantly started panicking, telling her I was sorry, crying like never, like, I don't mean it. I didn't mean it. I'm sorry, all that. And she did not care. She marched me out through the apartment with my suitcase and put me in the outer vestibule of the building and shut the door. And I was out there, ringing the bell, knocking on the door, crying, like begging her to let me back in. And it went on for 45 minutes. And I know that because the neighbor from across the hall finally came out, and she was very tall. She banged on the door. And then my mother came to the door because she did not ever want to be embarrassed, by anyone like outside the house, kind of a thing. That's like airing your dirty laundry. And so she instantly opened the door and let me in. And this woman said to her, "What are you doing? She's been out here crying like this for 45 minutes. She's tiny. Like, you can't do that." So I learned, like, if I don't listen and do what I'm supposed to do, she will just put me outside. Like, love will be withdrawn. So when you get those lessons, right, you're obviously sharing a lot of like intense examples from my history. We all have it. We all have our own histories. Listen, there are people who are come out of childhoods that are so much worse than what I'm describing. I mean, so much worse than what I'm describing. And there are people who thankfully had great childhoods where they felt safe and they felt cherished and they felt loved. And that's beautiful. No matter what, we all have our histories, our context. All of us, that's our context. That's our stuff. What you do with it is up to you. You have, the ability to, as I said, work and really understand yourself. And for me, therapy was great at like sort of getting the cerebral part of it, like understanding like, okay, yeah, of course, like I get it. I get why it would feel like home for me to be chasing someone who was not responding, that whole anxiously attached person chasing after the avoidant person. But knowing it helps. It certainly helps, but it's not the full Monty. You're still going to have all those feelings. And for me, that part two of really rewiring things happened on a yoga mat. I started practicing yoga when I was 20. And I, first of all, think just my nervous system, just with the deep conscious breathing for extended periods of time, I think my nervous system was like, oh, okay, excellent. This is good. Keep doing this. So I started to just feel better on a very visceral, noticeable level. And then I became intrigued because I was like, why is this practice that is physical? Like, why is it having an emotional, mental sort of like, why is it helping me in that way? And that's when I started to dive into the philosophy and do teacher trainings. And it was not with the intention to teach. It was just with the intention to understand more. And, part of the practice is self-studies, is understanding yourself so that you can be accountable for the energy that you're spreading, the way that you're behaving, the things that you're saying and doing. And part of it is non-harming, right? Ahimsa, like we have the yama and the niyamas, like the yoga's shalls and shall nots, not a religion. It's just like, these are the concepts there at the foundation of the practice. And, you're really not supposed to be doing the physical part till you get that part down. But that's another story. So, I just these ideas started to really take hold. And the interesting thing is that when you are whatever, I'm not a zealot, it's like, this is what worked for me. I don't think there's any formula that works for everyone. This is just what happened to work for me. But I started to understand, well, if I can be in, let's say, a lunge on my yoga mat and I could breathe through the intense sensation for like 12 breaths in Warrior 2, that is helping me when I'm in a challenging situation in my life, just to know that I can stay steady, I can keep breathing, I can stay calm, even though this is challenging, even though this is like, it's just not easy. And at a certain point, I realized that sensation is sensation. So it's like that sensation of feeling challenged in your body is the same sensation of like being on hold with a robot asking you, did you say 4? Like, it's the same thing. If you can breathe through it in one place, you can breathe through it in another place. And if you have fear of abandonment or fear of anything, fear of failure or fear of, whatever it is, if you start working with fear on your mat, like, let's say there are like arm balances or inversions. I was not a gymnast as a kid. I did not dive into a pool head first. So that stuff was scary for me. If you can work with your fear on your mat and keep breathing, and, when you fall down, get back up and try again. You're working through your fear. You're working with it. You're working through it. And then eventually, when you start to have these milestone things that happen, breakthroughs rather, it's like it's not about the pose. It's that you stayed with it. You were scared, but you kept going. You didn't let it stop you. And now you're doing this thing that you thought maybe you would never do. And that is really, it builds your confidence. And if you didn't have that, like if that wasn't part of your wiring to have it be okay to fall down and get back up and try again. Because I did not have that as a kid. It's no mistakes. Do not make any mistakes, right? So like just reteaching yourself, rewiring. So that for me was a huge thing. Why am I sharing all of this? Well, because what was starting to happen over the last few weeks is, and I don't really want to get into too many specifics anymore because I'm tired of the specifics of this whole situation. And it's not one situation anyway, it's many situations. But what was starting to happen is I was seeing a lot of people talk about, oh, well, this is being taken out of context. This person didn't mean it like that. You're just taking this tiny little thing that was said out of context. Okay, so for someone like me, when you start to see clips of things, quotes, or, clips of like videos or whatever, like, interviews or debates or whatever it is, or, clips from a speech, and you're like, that sounds horrendous. That sounds like hate speech. Like, how can it be? Like, what context could there possibly be that would make that clip that I just saw make sense and not be what it appears to be? Like, how can that be? And because it did not make any sense, I would then go and look at the full length interview, debate, whatever it is, because I'm like, okay, let me see if, so many people are saying these things are being taken out of context. Let me go look. And not surprisingly, what I found is that was not the case. The context, the clips were very much in line with, what this person felt and believed. And for me, it's very disorienting and dizzying and upsetting when people are, you're looking at something and you're like, that does not seem good. And people are like, no, it's fine. You're just not understanding it. You don't understand because you're not seeing the full context. That's how I grew up. I would get up and I would be like, I'm in pain emotionally or physically because of what happened with my mom last night. And everyone in her circle is telling me it's fine and it's me. It's the same thing. It's the same thing for me. I'm like, what is going on here? What are people talking about? Let me go look and see the fuller picture then. Because this is not just, I think we all know what I'm talking about. This was not someone that I spent time listening to because I was not resonating with the ideas that I was seeing. But when people kept saying this context thing, I did go. I spent hours listening, watching, and I was even more devastated than I had been because you really, there is no other context when someone is saying something incredibly painful to someone or speaking over them, or there's a pattern of this is what this person thinks about this topic and they've been very clear about it. So that's what I found. I looked and I listened and I spent a lot of time looking and listening because I really was having a tough time with the whole context conversation, and things were not being taken out of context. The context is right there for everyone to see if they want to. And, and I think that if you do that and you still are in line with those ideas and feelings, then the least that should happen is you own it. That's the least that should happen. If those ideas resonate with you and you agree with them, then it's just better to say that, or know it yourself. Know it yourself. Like, this is what I think. I agree with this, or some part of me likes this, and try to figure out what's going on. That's the work, is like, why am I willing to let someone tell me history doesn't matter? And, you know, the background here doesn't matter. Why would I allow myself to believe that? If I know that it matters for me personally, then I know that it would matter if, like, what happened to me happened to a group of people. Of course it would impact the way they feel and the way they are moving through the world. And, like, let's say 30 people had the exact same parents I did and grew up exactly the same way I did, just in the same house. I know it's weird, but just go with me on it, right? 30 of us in my room, all different, shapes, sizes, names, everything, genders, but we're all having the same experience. We would all have pretty similar feelings about whether we were safe, or, and it might manifest in different ways. You can have siblings in a family and they've got very different parents. You talk to them you look back at a memory from something that happened in, 1982, and you might have 5 different versions of, like, what happened at Thanksgiving dinner. But my point is, if there were 30 people who are like my age living that same experience, we'd all have a similar outlook and a similar stuff to work through, however it manifested. And so, it's a painful thing to deny a person, to say to somebody, it doesn't matter what happened to you. It doesn't matter. We're only going to look at, like, what's happening right now. That's what we're going to look at. Now you're pulling them out of context. You're trying to take them out of context and say, whatever happened in the past doesn't matter. It's not reasonable. First of all, this is not how human beings are. We all have our stuff. And so even for me at this point, after all the work I've done, that old wiring is still there. It's dormant, but once in a while something will happen and it'll, like, the old motherboard will light up, and thankfully I have tools. So I'm able to be like, oh yeah, I know what's happening. It's fear of abandonment, whatever, like waving its, head at me to see if I, it's like, no, I'm not, thank you, but I've done my work. I'm not going to, like, let that own me again, So, but it's just, context matters, and being able to just really look at what you're attracted to, what ideas you're attracted to, what's appealing to you, what's going on for you, what's driving you to think, I like what this person is saying or not, like, just to really try to figure that stuff out, self-study. I think when if you are sort of, and this goes for anything, okay? Like, whether you go to a therapist, let's say, or you go to a yoga teacher, or you go to study with someone, because you want to take an art class or something, like, you want to really pay attention and make sure, I like what this person is saying, and as much as I can, I see the way they seem to be living their life, and that speaks to me. There doesn't seem to be a divide between what they say and then how they're behaving. You got to kind of vet a little bit, right? And really see, because that was the other thing that was starting to trouble me so much, is because I have been, I've been writing for my entire life. For as long as I can remember, even as a kid, that was one of the ways that I got my feelings out that was safe. I used to hide my journals from my mother, because if she had found them, that would not have been safe. But that is a way I've always sort of processed, like, how am I feeling? And it's a way I've always made sense of the world around me. And I've been teaching yoga for, like, over, 30 years, I think. And so when you start to see a whole bunch of people, I have a lot of people like that in my feeds, yoga teachers, and they're starting to lionize people who really, said some dreadfully painful, you know, things to many different groups of people. That is tough to look at, because what happens for me is I start thinking about everyone who's ever practiced with that person, all the demographics of people who've ever practiced with that person, and how they must feel right now. Like, to hear that this teacher that they were in a room with for years, trusting and thinking, I can, like, really, I'm trying to heal here, thinks that this person who said so many awful things about so many different communities is a good person. That's rough. That's rough. So there's that. So I was writing about that last week. And this week, and again, I'm like, I think we're all exhausted here in the States. We're exhausted from what is happening. And I can't, you just get to the point where it's like, it's exhausting, it's debilitating. And I'm sure I don't have a sore throat for, like, no reason. I am used to, I'm a woman and I write on the internet, so I get attacked. It's part of the deal. And you get to a place where you're like, okay, there are places where I write that I feel incredibly comfortable, and that's where I do most of my writing now. And then there are places where you post things and you're like, this platform does not feel great anymore. I don't know. It's feeling kind of weird. And so, you just kind of figure things out as you go. But we've crossed into a very strange territory here in the States. And if you're here and you're failing to see that, I'm not sure what to say, because there are so many heartbreaking things happening all the time. And I wrote about the Constitution this week, because part of what happened, there's so many things, something new and unbelievable happens every day now. And you have people who are, look, it is like there are two teams here. You've got Republicans and Democrats, and they're being taught to scream at each other and hate each other. And it's really dreadful. This is not the way like a country is going to be successful. You should never be getting that kind of messaging from the top down, like, ever. That's just throwing gasoline on the fire and making things more unsafe for everyone. President's supposed to be the president of all the people. You might notice, like, all the people pay taxes. All the people should be represented, no matter who is in office, But we don't have it's broken right now. It's broken. And I think everyone should be able to acknowledge that. This is not, we've got gridlock, and we have an administration right now that doesn't care about the Constitution. Full stop, does not care about the Constitution. Has been testing since day one what they can sort of run roughshod over, where they're going to be stopped and where they're not. And the first guardrails are always, it's the Congress, and then you have, like, the Supreme Court, and we've always had that's why we have separation of powers. That's why we have checks and balances. That's why you don't put all of the powers in the executive branch, or the judiciary. Like, it's why things are separated out, and they're supposed to be checking on each other so that nobody gets too far out of hand. Because the whole idea was, we don't want a dictatorship here. We don't want a monarchy here. We don't want a king, and when that starts to break down, this is what you get. And, it's getting worse and worse. I'm sorry to say, it's not what I want to see. But when you start having, it's not even about comics. It's free speech. It's when you start seeing people being taken off the air because there's a merger that's supposed to happen and the president is threatening. This is not normal. This is not a normal chain of events. I've been alive for 54 years, and Watergate looks like a walk in the park. It looks like nothing. I grew up thinking, Richard Nixon was like the most immoral president, because oh my gosh, look what happened and all the president's men and all that. That is nothing compared to what is happening here. And I see people saying things, and this is not me. I want us to get along. I want things in this country to be good. I don't want to be fighting with people. That's not my deal. I want everyone to be okay, and I want our country to work. I don't want open borders. I don't want criminality. That is such a BS story that people are being fed. And I really hope I can't imagine anyone here is believing that, but nobody wants that. No sane person is like, oh yeah, open borders, just come on over. And, let's just who cares who gets, who has horrible things happen to them? No one wants that. Our immigration system's been broken for a long time. A lot of things have been broken and needed to be repaired, fixed, or rethought altogether. There's just a lot of things that have changed from when these systems were set up, just like the Second Amendment. These things need to change with time. And with the advancement of technology, that's why the founding fathers had the foresight to set it up so that there could be amendments, so that this could be a living document that would keep changing with a future they could not predict. And no one could have predicted this, for sure. So I was writing about the Constitution this week because one of the things that happened, and one of the things that's continuing to happen, and listen, the whole world is shifting right now. It's not just us, but it's happening here in a way that it is not happening in other places. And it is scary and heartbreaking. It doesn't have to be like this, friends. It doesn't have to be like this. Again, we have agreement on some things that I think a lot of people, if they're listening to their echo chamber, they probably don't know. Or if they're listening to the man who's supposed to be leading the whole country and hates half the country, and openly hates half the country and isn't shy about it, he is encouraging this division. He's encouraging this two sides thing. And even just before I got on here, I saw a clip of him saying the Democrats are crazy. They want, quote, transgender for everyone. Okay, I don't even know what that means. Do you know what that means? Because if you know what that means, you tell me. The Democrats want transgender for everyone. The Democrats want health care for everyone. And that means Republicans too. I know a lot of Republican seniors who rely on Medicaid to be okay, and Medicare. And so, yeah, I don't want that to end for you. I don't want you to be in a situation where you get sick and you're not okay, because I know what that is. I've lost both my parents since my mother at the end of 2021 and my dad in 2023. It's my stepdad's still going strong. He has Medicare. People rely on this stuff. They need it. And so when you start taking billions of dollars out of the budget, that's not good for anyone. It's not. It's not good for anyone. Not Republicans, not Democrats, not anyone. And, for me, as I started this talk, I was talking about how I feel, the planet, arriving here, having such a short amount of time, how bizarre it is to me that people spend their time here wanting to like plant a flag, like this is mine. Urgh. You're not taking any of it with you. I just want you to know. You're taking nothing with you. One day you're going to exhale for the final time, and I don't know what happens after that, and neither do you, and neither does anyone else. But I can tell you, if you spend your precious amount of time with your feet on this earth, screaming about how other people should live, who they should love, what they should, you are wasting your time. It's an insult to the time that you were given here. It is not a good use of your time. And no matter what you do, you're still going to exhale for the final time one day. And so is everyone that you love. And, right now, we're probably going to have a government shutdown, is my guess, because this president would not meet with the Democrat senators who wanted to meet with him to talk about the healthcare situation. I will tell you one more time, just in case you don't realize what's going on, that because of the quote unquote big beautiful bill, which I've been calling the big ugly bill, as have many other people, there's a reason I'm calling it that. The reason that I'm calling it that is because, just to give you an example, I get my health insurance through the Affordable Care Act, through Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter to me. And so I am a small business owner. I'm a writer, and I don't have an employer, right? I pay for private insurance that I get through the Affordable Care Act. I work very, very hard. If you knew how many hours a week I work, because I don't have a boss. I don't have somebody to say to me, okay, go home. The lights are going off now. The lights never go off. There are times where I realize at 1 o'clock in the morning I forgot to do something, and I will go and do it. I could not work harder if I tried. I'm getting emotional right now because I have kids. Like, I work as hard as anyone possibly could work. And, I have a small woman-owned business, and I got a letter from Covered California in June. And basically what the letter said is, look, because of this budget bill, if things don't change, the insurance that you have right now, the plan that you have, which is $346 a month, will be more like $2,000 a month. It's unless they undo what they did in this budget that they're trying to push through. They gutted Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act, and people like me would no longer get the Affordable Care Act subsidies, no longer get the Biden era tax credits. All that stuff would go away. But you know who benefits? Billionaires. And this is just stuff you can go and look up. You do not have to take my word for it. But these are the real life consequences of a bill like this, of a budget bill like this. People who are making way more money than they're in that 1% are doing better than everybody else. And people like me who are working so hard, I'm worrying. There is a constant thrum of anxiety underneath everything that I'm doing all the time, because I don't know if I'm going to be able to afford health insurance in January. I should not be worrying about this, friends. I should not be worrying about this. This should not be a thing that I'm like, what am I going to do? In a developed country, as a small business owner, I've been in business since 2009. This just shouldn't be a thing that I am concerned about, but it is a constant worry that's just there. I try not to focus on it because I've got things to do and people to take care of, people who need me. And so I don't want to be in a constant state of worry, but I am worried. I'm not sure what's going to happen because I am not at a good age to not have health insurance. I need to be able to get mammograms. I need to be able to get skin cancer checks. I had Mohs surgery a couple years ago, so I need to get checked. I'm a very freckly person. I need to get checked every 6 months. That's my Irish blood. I've got Italian and Irish. There are things that I need to be able to do, and I shouldn't be working this hard and this, diligently and be worrying about that. And I am, and I'll figure something out. I'm sure that I will, but it is outrageous that that's even a thing. And, for the people who are concerned about who we're going to be, like what kind of country we're going to be, free speech, no one deserves to be killed for their ideas, to be, shot, assassinated for their ideas, whether we're talking about anyone on any side. No one deserves that. That should not happen here. But when you have the president of a country pitting people against each other, that's not helpful. And when you have a whole bunch of people, pundits, on Fox News saying the most inflammatory things, that's not helpful. We need to calm things down desperately and really start working together, because if we don't, we're not going to have a country we recognize. And I'm afraid we're already past the point. I really am. I'm concerned now. Like, I was very hopeful that we could, turn things around. But if we do not start working together, it's not going to happen. If you continue to think I'm the enemy, we're screwed, because I'm not the enemy. The things that I think people are being, I am a liberal minded person. I always have been. I think everyone in a developed country should have health insurance, like universal health care. I don't think you should be worried about going bankrupt if you get sick. I do not think we should have anyone living on the streets. I think that's outrageous. I think we're failing. I do not think children should be shot at school every week. I do not think children should be hungry anywhere. I think canceling USAID, that was 0.3% of our entire budget. I think that was a terrible thing to do. I saw just briefly as I was walking in that RFK Jr. is now looking at having the FDA look at the abortion pill. If you don't understand what's happening to girls and women and women's rights and the SAVE Act and, to Black people, like if you don't, queer people, transgender community, like if you don't understand our immigrant population here, which gives so much to our culture, to our economy, to our success, like if you're not understanding, please, please take a breath. I saw something yesterday. It's ICE agents just absolutely assaulting this woman. And her children were there. And I was sobbing watching what happened. It was abusive and horrible. And without, if this is where we are, and half the people are watching a video like that and saying good, then we're in a lot of trouble. But I cannot and will not believe it's half the people. I just don't believe it. I don't. I think people are better than that. I really do. I think anyone who saw that video would have to agree that is just not how we treat human beings. There's no need for that, ever. So I don't know. I'm very sad, and I'm very scared about where we are and what's going to happen. I don't know. It's not, I can't control. It's like, I can just say what I'm saying. And, I've lost people along the way. I've gained people. There are a lot of people who would say, like, if you have a business, don't say what you think. Well, we're at like a crisis point here in history, and I am going to say what I think, and I'm going to try to say it as lovingly as I can and as clearly as I can. And I don't expect us to agree on everything. That's okay. It would be weird if we agreed on everything, but I certainly expect us to be able to agree on some basic things, like how we treat people, and that free speech is a good thing, and that, you know, yeah, just everyone deserves to have dignity and compassion, and that we have a very short amount of time on this planet. And I don't know, I think you want to look back and feel like you used it wisely and that you were kind. And if you're siding with people who are just, I mean, the cruelty is staggering. And if you're siding with people like that and you're not thinking about it, you're not questioning it at this point, I gotta ask you what's going on. I gotta ask you, what are you doing? Really? No matter what else you want or you think this country needs, we can have those conversations. But if you are still with this, I don't even know what to call it anymore. It is brutal what's going on and unconstitutional all the time. So I did link all that in the essay this week. If you are someone who loves the Constitution, the Bibles started going out in Oklahoma. I linked that too. They want to have Bibles in the classrooms in public schools, which is also there's a separation of church and state for a reason. Just a little quick reminder here. Public schools are funded by tax dollars. Not everyone is Christian. So it's really not like cool for, let's say, your Jewish neighbor or your Muslim neighbor whose kid is going to the same public school as your kid, for their kid to have to learn your religion. Like, why? Would you be okay if it was flipped? I mean, it's just not, this is not, there's a separation of church and state for a reason. And you can teach morality and you can teach ethics without tying it to religion. And frankly, I think it goes better for everyone when you do. But the Bibles went out this week. They started going out. That Ryan Walters, who's no longer the school superintendent of Oklahoma as of like a day and a half ago, he started sending these Bibles out. He wanted like $6 million. He wanted $3 million in the budget for the Trump Bibles. They're $60 each, whatever. These are not those Bibles. They're like King James Bibles, but in the back of the Bibles, they have the Bill of Rights, the Pledge of Allegiance, and an old version of the Constitution that includes the 3/5 compromise and excludes amendments 11 through 27. So I just want to let you know a few of them. The 13th Amendment is the one that said there's no slavery, unless it's as a punishment. I mean, you should really go look at this stuff. It's, it's good for everyone to know. But the 13th Amendment is where it says in the Constitution, we are not having slavery in this country. That is not going to happen. There's a loophole, but that's what the amendment said. The 14th Amendment is a big one. It is so important, and that one's not included at the back of this Bible. That's your due process. That's got the citizenship clause. That's got like so much stuff in there. Equal protection clause, like a lot of things that kids should really know about, that everyone should know about. So if you don't know about this stuff, please go look at this week's essay. I'm going to skip ahead. There's a ton of amendments. The 19th Amendment is so women can vote, but not all women, no, because Black women in the South still, they had all kinds of things that they were trying, like Jim Crow laws and discriminatory laws and poll taxes. And then we had amendments that said we're not doing poll taxes anymore. And there's the 25th Amendment. I mean, there are amendments that that deal with like the term limits on the president, stuff that is terrifying, frankly, because now we're not even at the PragerU part of the event where they are wanting these videos to go out to kids where Christopher Columbus is telling kids, well, you have to consider slavery in the context of the times, and it's better than death. No, we're beyond that now. Now they're literally just trying to edit slavery out of our history. So this is just like part of what we're dealing with here, and I don't know. I mean, I am at the point now because I've had friends post things that I just was like, what is going on here? So I make no assumptions anymore about anything or anyone, but I know that it does not have to be like this, and it shouldn't be like this. And the people in power don't care about any of us. They really don't. They just want to keep us screaming at each other while they take every last thing they want. And, I don't know. I don't know what else I can do that I'm not doing. But I am sending you a lot of love. And I know it's scary times. So if you're someone who is feeling anxiety, please make sure you're taking care of yourself. Like, whatever else happens, try your best to find some joy, do some things that bring you joy every single day. Reach out to people who are feeling what you're feeling because it'll make you feel less alone. And, we're going to keep trying. I'm certainly going to keep trying to resist and to fight back and to fight for a country that I do love, but I don't recognize at the moment. I don't recognize this. And I hope we can save it. I really do. I hope we can save it. And, we need a do-over. We need to start over from where we are right now as part of the meditation practice. You just start where you are and you start again. We need that now. This is not working. But it doesn't need to be like this. And this is really scary and sad. So I'm sending you love, and you know where to find me if you need a little support.